Welcome back to For Real. It's great to have you here for today's news moto. Thank you so much for watching our videos. 100% of the money we earn from YouTube goes to charities here in Cambodia, and you are helping us earn this money just by watching. In the description of our videos, you can see how much we've earned from YouTube each month and which charities we've supported. There are links to those charities in case you'd like to support them yourself. It's time to get started with this week's news. Today is Wednesday, the 26th of January 2022. Let's start today's news moto by checking what has changed since last week's FAQs. Well, in a diversion from last week, one thing has changed, so let's do a quick rundown and look at the details. The land borders are still closed, visas on arrival are not yet available, tourist visas are available online through the official government site, they're valid for 30 days and can be extended once for a total of 60 days. If you are vaccinated, you can enter Cambodia without quarantine. ASEAN passport holders don't need a visa. You don't need to pay a deposit on entry. COVID insurance is not mandatory, but it is recommended. More on this in a moment. And now for the one thing that has changed. If you test positive for Omicron, either when entering Cambodia or when you have your pre-departure test before you leave, you will no longer be taken to a government facility. Some foreigners were placed in these facilities, and I understand that they made their situation very public through social media. Prospective travellers are nervous about these things, and bad publicity can be enough to deter them. The government has understood the potential negative impact this could have on the delicate recovery of the tourism industry, and they've moved quickly to address it. Following a suggestion from the Prime Minister on the 21st of January, the Ministry of Health has issued a directive on the treatment of people who have tested positive for the Omicron variant. The directive permits home quarantine for those who test positive with Omicron. The Prime Minister explained that even though Omicron is known to be the fastest spreading variant, it is not as dangerous as Delta and Alpha. For foreigners infected with Omicron, he said, it depends on them. They can choose to be treated at their hotel or embassy or another selected place. They are not required to be admitted to the hospital anymore. This new order came into force immediately after it was announced. But what if someone else tests positive on your flight? Nothing has changed on this one, and the number of days you will be told to isolate is still uncertain. What is certain is that we now know that your fate will be determined by the spinning prize wheel. Stay with me a bit longer on this. It occurred to me that this is a metaphor for many things in Cambodia. If you look behind the wheel, it will be absolutely clear why the wheel stops where it does. The problem is that you can't see this from the front, and you're not able or not allowed to look behind. That's how a lot of things are for us as expats in Cambodia. Make no mistake though, this is a very organised society and there is a reason for everything. It's just that the reason is often not visible to us. Anyway, if you're on a flight with an Omicron-positive person, the location where you undertake the isolation is of your choosing. I'm not sure whether this period of isolation is monitored in any way or whether it's left to the individual to comply. As we always say, keep reading the information that's out there in the Facebook groups because the situation is ever changing, and reading first-hand reports is a great way to get a good understanding of what is actually happening on the ground. Regarding mandatory insurance, the Khmer Times had an interesting article about this yesterday. The link will be in the pinned comment, as usual. It was titled COVID-19 Insurance Options for Foreign Tourists in Thailand Mulled as Cambodia's Requirements Stuck in Grey Area. The article compares the two countries' approaches. It says foreign tourists are likely to have more insurance options to cover hospital and hotel isolation expenses in Thailand as the government is trying to solve the problem of COVID-infected tourists refusing to pay for medication or running away from hotels. In Cambodia, meanwhile, the requirement for a $50,000 insurance policy to ensure sufficient coverage for treatment of COVID-19 remains a grey area. The rules set up by the Ministry of Health do not mandate these policies any longer, but its implementation is left largely to the officers on duty at the airport. Some passengers are still being asked for insurance policies, and if they're not in possession of one, are forced to purchase one online in order to proceed further. Others who had taken the trouble to purchase insurance policies were left flabbergasted when nobody asked to see it. A travel agent in Cambodia said, "Travellers are at a loss as to what they should do. We get inquiries all the time for help in procuring insurance, as word is out that it is selective in nature with some passengers being asked for it while many others are not," the travel agent said. The Tourism Authority of Thailand's governor said the government is discussing with the Office of the Insurance Commission offering COVID-19 insurance options for vaccinated tourists whose travel insurance does not cover medical expenditure for hospitals or hotel isolation for mild asymptomatic cases. A new ruling for the Centre for COVID-19 Situation Administration last week stipulated that if a tourist's insurance doesn't cover all medical expenses for the COVID-19 infection, they are responsible for such expenditure themselves. The problem is that expenses are incurred when a person has to isolate because they test positive. They do not have symptoms that would require medical assistance, therefore their insurance doesn't cover their accommodation expenses. It's worth checking the fine print of your policy so you know whether your hotel expenses would be covered, and if not, choose your hotel wisely in case you find yourself having to stay there for 2 weeks. Apparently, during the few months when the Thai Test and Go scheme was active, there were several reports about infected tourists going missing from hotels. Cambodia has now recorded 653 cases of Omicron, 429 imported and 224 community cases. These cases have been diagnosed by PCR test and must represent a very small proportion of the actual case numbers. Since the symptoms are likely to be mild and PCR tests are not widely undertaken, it's likely that there are many more positive cases that are going unrecorded. This is expected by the Cambodian government and is the result of a deliberate move away from testing of all suspected cases now that COVID is endemic. Are you a cruising kind of tourist? If so, you'll be interested to know that the brand new port in Kep has just been inaugurated. The port, built on a total area of 3,470 square metres, can accommodate 3 cruise ships with a capacity of 150 passengers each, and also some smaller tourist boats. This is a new milestone in Cambodia's tourism sector. It's hoped that the port will attract more tourists to this coastal province in the post-pandemic period. If you're a water lover and you want to cruise to Cambodia, do it in March because Kampong Tom province will be holding its 7th River Festival. The festival has been cancelled for the previous 2 years. One resident of the province said he is excited that the 7th River Festival will go ahead as he had missed the celebration for the last 2 years. He hoped it would boost the tourism sector. I plan to take my family around the province for the festival, especially to visit the exhibition booths and concerts. Splashing water during the festival is also a cleansing ritual and for good wishes, he added. From water festivals to creatures from the ocean. It would seem that the shrimp traffickers have been up to their tricks again. Authorities in Kampot detained a truck that was transporting seafood. The cargo was deemed unfit for consumption and turned over to the relevant authorities. The shrimp were discovered to have been injected with jelly, effectively turning them into jellyfish. The crackdown on tainted, dangerous and unregistered goods and food products continues in the country as officials fight to prevent any loss of life or danger to public health. Unfortunately, an incident of mass food poisoning has been reported with more than 30 falling ill in Snom Brampi village just outside of Kampot town. A joyful party ended in a hospital visit for 34 guests due to food poisoning. The party took place at a water treatment plant in Kampot's Tepchud district. According to the authorities, at around 6 p.m, there are reports of mass food poisoning and a total of 34 people ended up in the emergency room. As of the 22nd of January, all victims have recovered. At the same time that the partygoers were doubled over with stomach pains, more than 12 tonnes of illegally transported mollusk was seized by authorities. A truck carrying a cargo of more than 12 tonnes of edible mollusk was seized by the authorities in Kampong Spu. The truck was seized as it travelled along National Road 4. The driver was transporting the mollusk without a permit with an eventual intended destination of Vietnam. In another fishy case, a truck transporting shrimp along National Road 33 from Prek Chak International Border Gate to Phnom Penh was seized. The truck and its chemically laden cargo were discovered on the morning of the 22nd of January. Authorities discovered 143 cases of shrimp in the truck and 81 cases of shrimps were discovered to have some sort of gel injected into their heads. The total weight of the cargo was 1,484 kilograms. The chief stated that the tainted shrimp were burned by the authorities on the afternoon of the same day. It must be a very tedious task injecting gel into shrimp heads. It is our duty to take you now into the dark world of drug crime. Police in Phnom Penh's Troy Chang Va district yesterday arrested 11 men and 4 women accused of drug use and trafficking in a Cham community. They were caught red-handed while they were smoking the drugs inside their rental house rooms. Police seized 12 small packages of methamphetamine and paraphernalia. That would be considered a coffee table or maybe even a lamp table of shame. A 37-year-old man was charged in the Phnom Penh Municipal Court yesterday for possessing and trafficking 25 kilos of mixed drugs in Phnom Penh. What do you do when you want to make a table of shame but you have no table? You lay it out on the floor instead. Check the link for this impressive table of shame on the floor. The 37-year-old was charged with drug possession, trafficking and transport under Article 40 of the Law on Drugs Control. If found guilty, he'll face a life sentence. The Municipal Anti-Drug Department Deputy Police Chief said that the accused had been under close surveillance by the police for transporting drugs via the Cambodian-Lao border in Stung Treng province. He was stocking the drugs at his rental house in Phnom Penh and subsequently distributing them to drug users in the capital. Anti-drug police knew the man's identity and hiding place based on the report of an undercover police officer who posed as his client and drug dealer. The raiding party seized more than 25 kilos of mixed drugs from the man's house. Let's finish up this week's News Moto with a couple of good news stories. The first is that the endangered Asiatic black bears listed in the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List of Threatened Species have been spotted in Cambodia's forests. Asiatic black bears are threatened by habitat loss and poaching. Camera traps have spotted the bears in protected areas of Pasat, Battambang and Kokong provinces. Sun bears, the smallest and rarest of the world's 8 living bear species, have also been spotted. They are excellent climbers and spend considerable time in trees where they feed on sweet fruits, small rodents, birds, termites and other insects, and also honey. Speaking of honey, the 29th of January marks the 1-year anniversary of the registration of Mundulkiri wild honey as a geographical indication product. This registration means that others cannot sell any honey products using the name Mundulkiri in their branding or marketing. 11 Indigenous communities are involved in the wild honey production. This is great news as it's a sustainable source of income for people living in this remote area of Cambodia. That brings us to the end of this week's news. You're now up to date with all of the most important events in the kingdom. Thank you so much for watching. Links to the stories mentioned will be in the pinned comment, and the description of this video contains links to other channels making content about Cambodia, so be sure to check those out. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you in our next video.